The trial of Ashley Benefield coming to a close, and it may already be done by the time you watch or hear this. We're recording this on Friday, the 26th of July. Jennifer Coffindaffer, retired FBI special agent, joining me. Ashley on the stand here on Friday morning, and it's been compelling thus far. A lot of the trial, in my opinion, not all that compelling. But what we're hearing on the stand right now, and this is prior to cross happening, just basing it on what we're hearing directly from her attorney, is a picture of Doug that is not all that flattering, and it's not just he said, she said. We're learning more about the past directly from the voice of the dead, his ex-wife, in a text message talking about prior abuse on their honeymoon, him kicking her, saying how displeased she was by that when basically his Viagra didn't work. And also accusations in there of him trying to record them having sex on their honeymoon without her knowledge. It's not the brightest picture. Jennifer, what's your reactions thus far now that we're just learning these little pieces of the past?
Well, I think a couple of things. First of all, procedurally, it just gives me a little bit of pause that they didn't have a digital expert come in and extract these text messages and authenticate them, if you will. I mean, we're really relying on Ashley and her attorney to authenticate this. So I'm just procedurally, it seems a little bit off, but making the presumption that indeed they're legitimate, it looks bad. It's what we call kind of 404B evidence, right?
Yeah.
Evidence of prior acts. So it's concerning.
It is concerning that it's being put out there like this. I mean, I would assume pieces like this would have had to have been in discovery, would they not? That the prosecution would also be aware that these things were going to be brought up because they're kind of big bombshells in the story of Doug.
Oh yeah, from a discovery standpoint, they absolutely would have had to known about this, and I would guess they did know about this. Again, I just don't understand why we haven't seen any introduction of digital evidence from her phone or from the computers that she used. Did she search anything? All these text messages that exist. It's just that is the kind of evidence you really need to lock in a he said, she said,
Mhm.
and it looks like they're getting the first bite of the apple right here.
And why do you think that is? I mean, there's so many cases where that ends up being like the crucial evidence in the case, even over DNA or anything of that nature. And granted, we know she shot him. That's not up for debate here. She admits all that. But as to why, that's where we're getting to the battered spouse syndrome. But we are seeing some of these texts, at least they're being brought up this way, but we're not getting confirmation, like you said, from any digital or forensic expert that's going to say, yes, these are in fact from him, that these aren't just made up and put on paper and saying, hey, this is evidence right here. Um, or was that done, on the outside? Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of confused by that.
Yeah, me too. It makes me wonder, did law enforcement do search warrants and do appropriate digital analysis of her phone and any electronics she used? I believe that that would be center of a case like this because of this self-defense. Well, if she Googled anything about guns or wanting a gun or, anything that could have been inflammatory, could have been used. Plus, her text messaging, possibly with family, with friends, possibly leading up to this, but yet we're seeing nothing. Did law enforcement just not serve subpoenas and search warrants in this arena?
I don't know. It's rather bizarre because I think even before this trial started, that's what a lot of us were speculating on. Is this case is going to be decided based on those pieces, and we're not even really hearing those pieces from any sort of an expert. There has been some interesting testimony this week, and I think what we're getting to in some of the testimony in the trial here of Ashley Benefield is her credibility. That's the biggest thing I think that's on trial here, because it does seem in some cases that she's fairly credible. And there's some cases where it seems, well, you've been making some things up. And I think it's a gray area, quite honestly, at the end of the day, that we're dealing with. It doesn't help anybody when it's a gray area because then you don't know what's the truth and what's made up or fabricated or expounded upon to an extreme degree to make herself look better. This is some testimony from Chris Gillum talking about an interaction in court where she just insisted that Doug be arrested because if not, he was going to kill her and the baby. And it seemed very out of turn when this took place. Let's take a look.
She was upset. And at that point, I would call it a dramatic cry, hysterical cry, started happening. And I'm still informing her, we're not going to do that. We're just not going to arrest him in the courtroom. And she made a comment, something to the effect of, if the judge sees you arrest him, this will help me keep my baby. So I thought that was a pretty bold statement. And I'm like, I'm still trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. She just gave birth. Maybe she's confused. And I'm trying to explain to her gently, that's just not going to happen, especially not going to happen for a judge to see to help you in a civil matter.
And did you, in fact, explain all that to her?
Yes, I did.
And how did she react?
We went back and forth 5 minutes or so. Just kept requesting to arrest him. I said, that's not going to happen. And her tone turned from the crying to very aggressive, and she says, you will effing arrest him in front of the judge, and I will make sure you do it.
What did you say to that?
I started pushing back a little bit, and I said, it's not going to happen. Whatever you say or do, you cannot make me arrest somebody in front of a judge, and it's just not going to happen.
And what did she do?
I guess she started crying again, and came out with a comment, something to the effect of, I can't believe you're willing to allow Doug to kill me and the baby.
Okay.
And that hadn't come up in this phone call. The phone call dealt with me arresting Doug in front of a judge. And then it turned to arresting, or not arresting him, and allowing me to let him kill her and the baby.
It's interesting the way that she behaved in court. Interesting on two ways, because if you're looking at it and assuming she's kind of a narcissistic person, that's basically kind of classic narcissistic behavior. If you will do this now, and if you don't, I'm going to have a fit, I'm going to stomp my feet, I'm going to do everything. It can also be the testimony of someone who knows more personally of what's going on, who's a victim of abuse, who has not been able to speak out or have her experiences heard and understood by anybody on the outside, which is why it may be coming across as a bit out of turn. What's your thoughts?
Well, I think this, Tony. First of all, when a judge heard from her before, that judge found her completely unreliable
Hmm.
and said there was not a scintilla of information she provided that would persuade the judge of her accusations. But this is the thing, Tony. Those aren't, those jurors are not judges.
Hmm.
They're jurors. And all they have to do is touch one juror to believe the other side of the coin that you just talked about.
Hmm.
In other words, that she knew something, and that's why she was acting so erratic and requesting, that he be arrested because she feared for her life or the life of a baby. So I don't know that that testimony necessarily helped if one person is thinking that maybe she was abused.
Yeah, and it's interesting in her testimony on Friday. She actually had positive things to say about Doug as well. They were asking her, what was your relationship like with him? And it went from, very scary and horrific to I loved him very much. He made me feel really good about myself, and it wasn't all negative. Her, in fact, admitting that she feels horrible about what took place, but at the time also not feeling like she had any other options, which is where we get to the battered spouse syndrome. It doesn't necessarily mean you're just battered and you're going to go shoot somebody. It means everything is going to be, the volume on that relationship is going to be 10 times louder than maybe what it would be if you've not had those traumatic experiences with that spouse that has been battering you. It doesn't always have to be physical either. Emotional is a huge piece of this. And it does sound like Doug in the past has a tendency to kind of fly off the hook from evidence that's not even from Ashley herself, from the ex-wife. That's where it's kind of getting to me, and I'm starting to really wonder what the jurors are going to think about all this when it comes time for them to deliberate.
Well, I agree. And I also think, from the autopsy information that we have, right, we know that actually it wasn't in the back,
Hmm.
right? It was an arm grazed to the chest and a leg wound, and then two stray bullets that went into the wall. I remember hearing at least at one point that they were to the back, and I don't think that's been proven as accurate.
Hmm. No, yeah, you're right. The scratches that were on her side, they did bring that up in the testimony today. And I gotta say, I called it. I said, it looks like it's from a box. It was from a box, but it wasn't her just walking through a crowded room of boxes as she's packing up her things. She says that Doug was being very aggressive that night where he was shot, and had like lifted a box up at her. This is her he said, she said thing, and lifted it up at her. And then that's what scratched her. But it was, in fact, a box. I called the scratch. Uh, but but the thing is, there wasn't threats to anyone's life that night until until she drew the gun. Basically, he apparently got very upset, and here's the reasoning for, I guess, things getting upset. Was she was in the U-Haul, or the moving vehicle, and saw that both of their things had been mixed together, which in his mind at that point in time was just fine. They're moving together at the same time. Why would it be separated? And according to her, he got quite upset and started berating her, started saying, it's your stuff, my stuff, same thing. We're married. You need to start acting like a wife. That's a direct quote from what she said in her testimony. And it just continued on throughout the evening of Doug allegedly being very frustrated with her continuing to try and de-escalate. According to her, she said she was trying to de-escalate, and then eventually it ended up with the gun being drawn when she felt that she was trapped in the home. According to her, he got in front of the door and said, where do you think you're going? You're not going to leave, and I can stay here the night if I want to. After she claims that she asked him to leave.
Well, I will say that no matter the he said, she said, when you think about literally somebody getting a gun, and this wasn't just your normal, a small 22 or even a 9. This is a huge caliber gun, a 45 caliber gun, which is difficult to shoot for many ladies,
Hmm.
and it's got a powerful, powerful kick. And she shot, I believe, 4 times, and just the fact that she went and retrieved that, I just all to say there's some, imaginations that had to take place in terms of physical things she had to do during this confrontation to all of a sudden have this gun and shoot him 4 times. So, I'm looking forward to those particular details. I didn't hear that yet. It's probably going on as we're recording right now.
Yeah.
But it's going to be interesting for her to explain that because people don't just walk around with a 45 at their side.
No, she claims she retrieved it from the bedroom in a moment where she was trying to calm down and get away from him that evening, and she had no other recourse. He had been blocking the door, according to her, and wanted to find some sort of weapon to maybe make him stand down, and that clearly did not happen. She claims that he got into, as we heard earlier from the attorney, into a fighting stance of some sort, and allegedly approached her, and that's when she fired the shots. Uh, Again, it's a lot of she said. We don't really know what he'd say. He is gone, so we're strictly relying on that as the evidence. Which, again, if you take it at face value, and we didn't have the other negative things about Doug, um, it is somewhat believable, despite there being other inconsistencies in her story. Uh, to me, it almost feels like this is a story of two very unhealthy people that were together engaging in very unhealthy behavior that ended up in a horrible situation.
Yeah, no, I agree, but I still don't think that that story that she's putting forth really holds a lot of water.
Hmm.
I went to go, collect myself, and instead I collected a 45 and came out, and
True.
he approached me. Who approaches a woman that's angry with a 45? I think I'd be taking cover or running. But in any event,
Yeah.
you know, the story, I agree with you, has taken a turn in her favor. I think with these prior text messages and the fact they've been able really to paint a bad picture
Hmm.
of him, because they really only have to reach one juror.
Hmm.
um you know it I think that the scales are tipping a little bit toward the defense, possibly a hung jury. But again, it's when you're really in that courtroom and you get to watch her expressions every day and every minute, you never know what this jury is really thinking.
If she's acting, she's a very good actress. What I believe is that she believes what she's saying. Not to say that that is through the prism of reality, but I do believe she believes what happened was justified and that she had no choice in the matter, even though reality may be different. I don't feel like she's looking at this as I'm trying to spin a tale and get away with something. I think she fully believes that everything that took place, that she had no other recourse.
Well, and we're seeing other, women get off for, their actions resulting in the death of their spouse or their loved one.
Hmm.
It's certainly a defense that has been working if the jury believes that person testifying.
Hmm.
And she is doing a good job, I think, from the standpoint of they were very smart to put these messages on from the deceased spouse because it corroborates some of her accusations.
It does, and context is important, I think, in fully understanding the character of who Doug was behind closed doors, and we're getting to see a couple glimpses of it. And it's not a very pretty picture, and it's not necessarily what I think a lot of the family believes or knew as Doug, because quite often when people are like this, the only people who see it are the significant other behind the closed doors. The family's not going to see it. Same with her though too. I believe that she was probably a very different person behind closed doors as well. It'll be interesting to see what the jury thinks at the end of all of this.
But to your point there, you know, uh, dead men tell no lies and no truths, right?
True.
We only get to see one side of the pancake, and that's why it's very disappointing. I think the my biggest takeaway so far in this trial is, where is the digital evidence,
Hmm.
one way or the other? In other words, if they subpoenaed it or got warrants for it, it's either favorable for the defense or favorable for the prosecution, but it just seems not to be there, and that's disappointing.
If we get a hung jury, I wonder if we will get any of that digital evidence if the devices still exist. I mean, certainly, if there's stuff on the cloud, that could be retrieved, I would think. But I don't know. I'm kind of with you. I said yesterday, even before she started testifying, I think we're going to get a hung jury on this because I don't know. You could really understand it from both ways, but there's just not that clear piece that tells us accurately what was going on. It may reside in that digital evidence if it exists.
Well, to take that a step further, his digital evidence as well,
Hmm.
that should have been completely retrieved and
Hmm.
looked into, because just like in the Murdoch case, you can see steps.
Hmm.
Just like in the Karen Reed case, you can see if that phone moves.
Yeah,
And that would help corroborate, did she really walk to the bedroom
true.
and retrieve that gun, or what exactly happened in terms of the movement? Again, if she had the gun or had the phone in her
Yeah,
pocket or in her hand during the event. But there's so much to be gleaned, and I feel like we just have a big dead spot in this trial.
I agree. Hey, thanks for checking out the video. Be sure to follow us wherever you download podcasts, and especially Apple Podcasts, where you can get advanced episode and premium content on our premium channel right there. Also, be sure to follow us on social media so you don't miss any breaking updates on the stories that matter to you most. We're on TikTok, X, Instagram, Facebook. Just search Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Brueski, and you'll find us right there. Again, thanks for watching.